Welcome to Constituting America's Constitutional Chats.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and thank you, Aubrey and Tova. I'm so excited to be here today and let folks know a little bit about America 250 and what's coming.
Well, great. And we're wondering if you would start with just a little overview of what America 250 is and maybe a little background on how it was formed, and then we'll go to some questions.
That sounds great. So the overall vision for this project was really born out of Congress. President Obama signed into law in 2016 the creation of the United States Semiquincentennial Commission. This is a commission that's made up of both private citizens as well as congressional representatives. It's pretty evenly balanced from a bipartisan perspective. And that is the official entity that Congress has put forth to oversee this incredibly impactful and meaningful milestone that's coming up, our 250th anniversary. The America 250 Foundation, similar to many other national projects, when you were reading my bio, you were referring to the 9/11 Memorial and Museum that used the same structure. There was a government entity, and now there was also created a 501c3 that is really the operational arm of the United States Semiquincentennial Commission. So we have a team of people from really all across the country with different skill sets. We have the responsibility to raise all the funds, private philanthropy funds for this effort, to actually plan the programs, to execute them, to form the partnerships, and most importantly, to involve each and every American in the effort. We do this under the auspices of the Semiquincentennial Commission, under the auspices of its chairman, Dan DeLella, the executive director, Frank Giordano. It's really a great example of a public-private partnership, even in its structure. So we're really excited. I've been part of this project. I joined last October, so about 7 months ago. And even in these last 7 months, really understanding the scope of what we're trying to do, which is fundamentally bring this country together, celebrate the fact that we are all part of this great experiment that is America, and that despite all the things that make us different from one another, there are these ties that bind us together as Americans. And it's really something special to celebrate. It's a moment in our country's history. And I think if we do this right, this will be something that generations from now, people will look back on and say, I can't believe at a time when the country sometimes felt so divided, so polarized, that we managed to take a break from that and come together to celebrate this very, very beautiful and special country that we're all blessed to live in.
Well, thank you. And it is, as you said, just such a wonderful opportunity for us to come together and for us all to remember what we share as Americans. And, you know, I remember, I think I was 14 in the Bicentennial, and I remember what an impact it made on me as a 14-year-old, even from the smallest ways that we celebrated in my neighborhood. I think my Girl Scout troop painted the fire hydrants in our neighborhood red, white, and blue. And I just thought that was the greatest thing ever. And then I remember, and you know, I think my dad is watching today. I remember that my mom and dad took us probably on our first airplane trip out to the East Coast, and we visited New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. We even visited Mount Vernon, and it was all spurred on by the Bicentennial. And so I think, you know, it's just such an opportunity for us as American citizens to have a renewed appreciation of not just our roots and our history, but to look forward for the next 250 years. But
that's right.
As you know, in that vein, how do you think that America 250, how our 250th birthday celebration will be different than the Bicentennial?
Well, I was 4 when the Bicentennial happened, but everyone that I've spoken to, including what you just shared with us, there's a commonality, which is the things that were so inspirational. Much of that happened at the community level. So whether it was local parades in town or painting fire hydrants, there's a recognition that regardless of what happens at the national level, there is a deep well of patriotism that is prevalent in cities and towns across the country. And so we're going to make sure that that is a major component of this project. I would say that probably the one thing that I think what we've committed to that will be different than the bicentennial is that while of course the East Coast is so important to our founding history, the 13 colonies and Philadelphia play a direct role in our founding, the semi-quincentennial and our 250th birthday is about America overall. So we have a very deep commitment to make sure that all 50 states, as well as the populated territories, feel deeply a part of this. Our programming that will be put on, we sort of look at it in three different areas. There's the national signature program, so programs that are truly national in scope, that are going to involve people from all 50 states. There are state level programs that will be about what goes on in particular states, but also how those states can be participants in the national programming. And then there's the very grassroots local components. And through the advancement of technology, what another aspect that's going to be different than the bicentennial is all of those community-based programs that are going on, the things that are so organic and so inspirational. We're going to be able to see them unfold in real time. The whole country will be involved in watching what's going on in Phoenix or in towns across California or Alaska. Technology is going to allow us to do things on a really broad scale that are both hyper local, but feel connected to the full semi-quincentennial itself. It's interesting. I got a lot of incoming messages about the Jubilee, the Platinum Jubilee that just happened in the United Kingdom. And there were some really good examples of a national event that also had a very local flavor to it. So we're learning a lot of lessons from there. Technology is going to be a big part of what we do here, all in service of bringing the country together.
Well, that's great. And I know Tova has got quite a few questions. So Tova, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I think you've already answered a lot of them, but I guess one question that I'm sure you and your organization has thought of a lot is, with America, a lot of people have the perception that America is very polarized at the moment, a lot of political polarization, but also just throughout our whole history, we have so many different groups with different identities and different stories. So how do you develop kind of a message and a cohesive vision to bring all the different parts of America together, especially at a more polarized time like this?
I would answer that question, Tova. I draw on from my experience at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. And I remember, I would get asked the question when I was leading that project. People would say, isn't it a shame that 6 to 9 months after the attacks, the unity that this country felt started to dissipate? And what I used to respond back then was that it wasn't a shame, that we are a democracy, we're supposed to argue, and that we're supposed to fight. But what that 9/11 showed us and the aftermath showed us is that when the times require, this country comes together with just limitless compassion for one another. I think that obviously not out of a tragedy, but again, out of a special moment in time, that there's a real opportunity to have that with the semi-quincentennial. Despite the level of polarization that we feel today, I think even the most partisan folks on both sides of the aisle, there is a certain yearning for finding what connects us with each other. And so we think that it's a huge opportunity for the semi-quincentennial to give people that space through programming that is really inspirational. For some folks, they will come to this 250th from all different areas, right? Some people are going to celebrate the fireworks and flyovers. Other people, it's going to be a really important aspect that this is a commemoration, not just a celebration, meaning that it's an opportunity to look back over the last 250 years to see how we've progressed I mean, I think that the one thing that makes America different than any other country ever is this idea that was ingrained in our founding, that we are a great experiment in democracy. And the idea that we have responsibility, individual responsibility to keep this experiment going and to perfect this union, that's an exciting thing to be a part of, and to track that progress over these last 250 years, to come together, to recommit to one another, to say that we've done great, but we still have more to go. I think people are going to be excited by that. So I'm hopeful. You know, one of the things that I've also gotten asked about with respect to this project is the idea of legacy. And for me, I think legacy can take so many different forms. There's physical legacy, which is so important, historic preservation, but there's also emotional legacy. And similar to 9/11, I'm hopeful, as I said earlier, that generations from now, people will look back and say, again, that despite how seemingly polarized we were, we did come together in a way that maybe was unexpected. And that's what we're working hard every day to make happen.
Love that. And then, so obviously when America 250 and the Semiquincentennial Commission were created in 2016, 2 presidents ago, and the pandemic was sort of something you never could have imagined, maybe when laying the groundwork for it. So I'm curious how the pandemic has affected either the actual form of the events that will occur, or maybe just the headspace the organization is in now going forward with planning.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was fortunate to join the organization last October. So still in the pandemic, still everything on Zoom. I think like many individuals and organizations, there's sort of this pent up desire to interact with people in real space. And I remember specifically wondering in sort of the deepest part of the pandemic, whether or not we would return or have a desire to be with other people in small spaces again, restaurants, bars, and everything. And I'm so pleased to see that people do want to get back together, going back to live sporting events, which, in terms of our themes, one of the things that we're going to be focusing on is what brings America together already. What things in our society bring people together across the political spectrum, the socioeconomic spectrum, ethnicity, geography, race, religion, all of that. And so much in culture does that, things like sports or the arts. And so coming out of this pandemic, rejoining real population, real people in real space, I think is really exciting. And I think it's just going to set us up perfectly for the future. I mean, we are certainly going to have, I talked about technology, really engaging programming. If you happen to experience this primarily from your home, but our biggest and our most aspirational programs will be about physically bringing people together, joining with those that you may have are comfortable with and you've been with for decades or years in the past, and also coming together with people that you might not share the same political ideals, but you can rejoice as Americans and as members of this great experiment that I talked about.
Yes, absolutely. And then looking beyond 2026, does the Semiquincentennial Commission in America 250, is 2026 the end date, or is it sort of a new beginning or a continuity of the organization and its ideals?
Yeah, we'll have to see on that. I mean, one of the kind of first things that I was able to discuss with the team at America 250 and some members of the commission is this idea that if America is as equally fractured on July 5th, 2026, as it was before all of this semi-quincentennial programming, then we will not have succeeded. And I believe that we will be able to achieve our goal of bringing this country together. If we are able to crack that code, at least in part, then I think there's every reason to want to continue that work and continue that programming beyond 2026. There's this, the notion of understanding our founding principles and how those principles and values and rights have been on a progressive journey of being applied to more and more Americans, as it should be. That work is not done. And just like I talked about earlier, about it's a need to feel a sense that America is not inevitable. We're not promised to be here in 250 years. And that in our founding DNA is this idea of service and giving back and civic engagement. I certainly see a role for America 250 as a collective effort to continue on well beyond the semi-quincentennial.
I love what you said about America is not inevitable, right? It's not just something that happens, it's something we all work towards. It reminds me of the story of Benjamin Franklin, when after the Constitution was, or Declaration of Independence or something was signed, and a student asked him, is it a republic? Or like, what is the form of government? And Benjamin Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it, right? We all have to take the responsibility on ourselves. And on that vein, Constituting America is an organization that primarily works with students to educate them about the Constitution. So what sort of programs are being geared towards students and towards young people, which I think is sort of something I'm working on too, but how do you view the role of America 250 with regards to young people and inspiring them on American history?
Yeah, I think it's really easy for me to say, because it's literally been in every conversation that I've had with the team at A250, both the staff, the commission, that our impact on youth is our highest aspiration. And it really traces back to your comment about responsibility and the Benjamin Franklin anecdote. This idea that a deeper understanding of our founding history and the notion that, those that got together to declare our freedom from the United Kingdom, that sense of giving back to your society is the best thing that we can do coming out of this semi-quincentennial. And the farther that we get away from that notion of giving back, I think does a disservice to the country. I mean, just looking back, for many, many years and decades, we had a compulsory draft. So the notion of service was just mandated, it was automatic. And of course, there's so many benefits to not having a mandatory draft, but it does lessen the percentage of people in this country that directly serve this country. And it's clearly not only, the military is an incredibly important way to serve, and lots of our programming is going to go and honor that service, but there's so many other ways to serve. Places like Constituting America, our teachers, our first responders, our public servants in general. We really want to ingrain this sense to our next generation of leaders that it's up to them. They have the mantle. We are passing the ball, to continue the sports analogy, to them. And I think you do that with serious programming, but ultimately it has to be engaging. I think nobody wants, I can speak for certainly for the team that's working on it, in order, and this was something I learned at 9/11 as well, that the best way to impart ideas and lessons is through really engaging in emotional storytelling. And America is made up of, throughout our history, of the most incredible stories of heroism and sacrifice, of what America has done on the world stage to help others. And even when we have not always reached our highest ideals, the way our own citizens call us to account to improve whatever the challenges society is facing, it's really been awesome. And the idea that, patriotism, which is a word that's been talked about in different ways over the last, 10, 20 years, the way we see it is that patriotism is something, as an example, that honors those who have fought and died overseas for our country, and a patriotism that honors those that have fought for civil rights in America, that you might not even think that what you do is patriotic, but there's so many people that are engaged to make this country better, to improve the lot for our fellow citizens to make sure those rights that were espoused in 1776 and in our Constitution are available and accessible to all Americans. That is patriotism. And this semi-quincentennial is really going to be an uplifting celebration of that. I think Tova's frozen.
Yeah, Tova may be frozen, but those
Morocco.
are just such great points. And we've got Jewel and Jorn who have joined us now. And Jewel, would you like to say hello and ask Joe Daniels a few questions?
Yes, I would. Thanks so much for being on. Sorry I'm late. Got stuck in traffic with no cell service, so it was kind of a crazy situation. Couldn't move the car and couldn't get any answer anybody's text wondering where we were. But still in the car now. But I definitely did not want to miss the show. Thank you for being on. So I may have missed it. But how did you become the president CEO of America 250?
I think it's interesting. When I left the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, I remember thinking to myself that I'd gone past the point in my career where kind of I felt as deeply passionate about the cause as I did at 9/11. As someone who was outside the North Tower at the World Trade Center on 9/11, 2001, getting the chance to work on that project and become its CEO, and then experience everything that it took to open the memorial on the 10th anniversary, 9/11, 2011, and then the museum a couple years later. I felt that part of my career had passed. But when I heard about this effort, it really spoke to me. I had this front row seat during the 9/11 process of what America can do when it comes together for one another. I mean, it was just incredible to see this, as much of the world saw, but to see this 16-acre site, utterly destroyed, to know that 2,977 innocent Americans, the youngest, 2.5 years old and the oldest 85, to take a place that was of such pain and destruction and be able to, with America, turn it into a place of renewal and hope and inspiration. It inspired me to want to be a part of this, because it's the same notion that bringing us together across such a wide-ranging spectrum to celebrate America, I just was so excited, and it made me remember. And I remember when I first heard about the job, my first experience with feeling patriotic was called to mind. And I remember I was 8 years old. I was watching the Olympics, which were in Lake Placid, New York, when the U.S. played Russia in the semifinal game, hockey game for the Olympics. And just hearing the arena, you could hear it over the TV, just shake with USA, USA over and over. It was inspiring. And I know we can bring that spirit to the Semiquincentennial. And I'm just blessed that the powers that be are putting their faith in the America 250 team and letting me have a chance to be a part of it.
Awesome. So the core of the celebration, would you say the core is patriotism? And if so, then say, why is patriotism important? Why is that a virtue? What is the relevance of that? Why should we be patriotic?
You bet. Well, I would say that the patriotism is the underlying foundation of this semi-quincentennial for sure. To me, patriotism is all about caring enough about your country and your fellow citizens that you're willing to put effort in to make this country progress even farther, to make it even better. And so that definition of patriotism really encompasses so many of us in this country, even those who are on completely opposite sides of the political spectrum. The notion of caring about your fellow citizen, your neighbor, your community member, folks that teach in our schools, or just want to celebrate those that have fought for our country in military service. It's patriotism to me means that you care about America. It does not have to mean, for some people, America is flawless. For others, America is full of warts. But wherever you feel about that, if you are invested enough to want to see America continually improve, you're a patriot in my eyes. And I think that this semiquincentennial and the US Semiquincentennial Commission, the America 250 effort is all about that. It is reaching out a hand to show that we are one country and that our diversity, we are who we are because of our diversity and not in spite of it. That's what makes us who we are. We are the most densely diverse nation in the history of the world. And being a patriot just means that you care about this country and you're willing to do something to make it better.
Very cool. And that kind of brings me to another one of my questions, which is about this you could see it as a tension between diversity and unity. You can definitely stress diversity to the point where it diminishes unity, but maybe there's another way to do that. And could you tell us, is this celebration gonna be more about celebrating the diversity or unity?
I think it's a great question, and it's really an important one for us to look at. And actually, as a part of the process of creating this commemoration, looking at questions like that, I think is really important. I think that what is really important is that when we talk about diversity, we are not talking about uniformity, not uniformity of in any physical sense, and not uniformity, most importantly, of perspective. I think what we mean is unity around what it means to be an American. And at the essence of America, one of our most defining characteristics is the fact that we're diverse. So I think those two things can operate together. I mean, there are some really kind of not that many, but really fundamental bright lines in this celebration. We are celebrating the Declaration of Independence from July 4th, 1776 to July 4th, 2026. But within those parameters, which are of course really, really wide, there's a ton of respect for all of the different components that make up America. I mean, what makes us special is our diversity. We've talked, just as an example, of doing a cooking show that would bring forth individual dishes from Americans who have cultures that are informed by where their families came from. You can imagine a dish from a Somali teenager from Minneapolis and a dish from a country teens from Georgia all together. And there's a pride that we can take when we step back and say, this is all America, how different it is. So yeah, it's about coming together, and it's about patriotism, but not necessarily uniformity, because that's not who we are. We're not a uniform country.
So I have a kind of a, maybe a little more cynical question. So American celebrations by nature, they make a value judgment that American values are worth celebrating. But these values are attacked in the political sphere quite often, and we see them politicized, and I'll leave it at that. But does the celebration of an American anniversary then have to be comfortable accepting that a true celebration is going to exclude some of those people that have chosen to take a political stake against those values?
That is a cynical question, but I like it. No, it's not a cynical question. It's a great question. I would say that my experience in dealing in this kind of patriotic space between the 9/11 Memorial, the Medal of Honor Museum, and now America 250 is that there's a lot of agreement, and again, across the political spectrum, about our founding values and the freedoms that were put forth then. Like there's always outliers even to that, but the notion of the rights contained in our Bill of Rights, or the Declaration of Independence, or of course our Constitution, there's a lot of broad agreement that the founders got that right. Where there isn't broad agreement and where this is a continuing experiment is the application of those rights to the broadest population possible. I mean, obviously the fact that this country had slavery for so long after our founding, and that it took all the way to the 1960s from the Voting Rights Act perspective. Women didn't have the vote until 1920. So that notion of application of our values and our freedoms, that is the crux of the challenge. And that's why I said that while this will be a celebration, there's also going to be a real component of reflection and to chart that journey of application of rights over these last 250 years. So there's going to be a space for most people in this country, even those that will, have protested as vociferously as you can imagine, to make sure that the rights that they see as important are being fairly applied. The very, very outliers that are sort of wishing that, we weren't a democracy, maybe they should, they may not find a place, they can go on to Minecraft or something for that time.
It's always a great answer if we can bring Minecraft into it.
That's right.
Thank you. So from the point of the founding, of course, there's so many different areas you could highlight. Is there anything that the Semiquincentennial is looking for as maybe this is the most remarkable element from the founding we want to highlight, or a poignant point of America from the beginning that you're trying to highlight? Or how are you able to choose your focus?
Well, it's really important to look at that two ways. We certainly, as sort of we refer to ourselves as kind of the mothership in this. We've got the commission and the A250 Foundation, but there's so much activity that we're in the middle of coordinating. So for example, there are 30 states that have already stood up state commissions. We have looked to make sure that all 50 states have their own A250 state-specific commission. So much of the federal government and the largest federal agencies are directly involved in working with us. So we approach this very humbly in the sense that it's kind of uniquely American, not necessarily to dictate every aspect of how this commemoration and celebration is going to go. So a real and significant part of our plans, which we'll be unveiling over the next 12 months, is actually going to be soliciting everyday Americans for their thoughts and their ideas about programs they'd like to see, both reacting to ideas and programs that we put out there, and also leaving space for new ideas and new programs to come up. What I will say is that one of the services that I think, or impacts that we can have, is by highlighting the stories that people might not necessarily know. I mean, there is a lot of our American history that is in textbooks that is really powerful, really important, and really interesting. But there are so many stories that aren't as well known and that equally bear on who we are as a country. So we're going to involve kind of the best and brightest around the country to directly contribute to that. We're in the thick of planning and working now to set up all the different structures to allow for those ideas. So if you guys have me back at some later point, I'll certainly be able to give an update on the specifics.
Very cool. Sounds like such a huge project, and I'm sure that you are not nervous, but you just want to make sure you do the best you can because it's a big deal. Is there anything you are maybe not nervous about, but that it's a concern that you really want to go right?
Yeah, I'm nervous about a lot, honestly. I mean, again, it's really helpful to be able to draw on the 9/11 experience. In that case, because it was out of such a awful tragedy, the level of responsibility, particularly to the family members, sometimes that really did feel overwhelming. And it's an interesting statistic to even cite today, but 40% of all of the family members, so almost 1,100 families, never got any human remains back from their loved one. So Ground Zero itself was the last resting place, essentially. So the sense of like responsibility to those family members, and then of course to the first responder community, the rescue and recovery workers, that did feel overwhelming at times. I think in this project, the responsibility is equally weighty, but there's much more opportunity, I think, to give people to get involved. I mean, it is not up to us, the people that wake up every morning thinking about the semiquincentennial now. We're going to put this on America, and we're going to make it easy for America to get involved. As far as like being nervous, I mean, let's just put it out there. I mean, when you see, major decisions in this country or major events that immediately polarize like right away, that's a concern, right? Because even though what I'm talking about is being able to come together despite our differences, sometimes issues happen where people are so fired up that, sitting with or breaking bread with someone who sees things differently than you is particularly challenging. The recent decision last week, I mean, immediately it was interesting. And it almost didn't matter what news channel you turned on, because at least what I saw, both sides were covered pretty well, regardless of what network you were on. Some people were extremely overjoyed, a culmination of decades long of fighting for something that they believed in terms of abortion not being a constitutional right. And others were absolutely devastated that a constitutional right that they thought was settled for the last 49 years was no longer the case. And so there's not that many issues that are like that. Abortion, of course, is one that is part of our fabric in terms of being at the absolute tip of the most polarizing. But that does worry me. But I also know that if we do this, if we make the journey to the semiquincentennial as special and as open as we're planning to, we'll build up, I think, enough kind of like trust within each other as a country that no matter what happens, I'm expecting that we're gonna make future generations proud of how we pull this off.
Yeah, there's a wonderful opportunity for this event to, of course, educate and inspire, but that feeling that you talked about of the chanting USA at the Olympics, I think that many of us who grew up and we watched the Olympics, maybe prior to the past couple when politics were right at the front of them, but maybe when I can think of back in the early 2000s and after that, just every time turning on and everybody loving to watch the Olympics. And if this celebration has any effect of that feeling of just like the chanting of the USA, it can't be overstated how positive that would be in everyone's life. Yeah.
I agree. And, when I was interviewing for the job, I talked a lot about that aspect and really sports in particular. And we're really lucky that, for people that it may not be top of mind, but the summer of 2026, the US and Canada and Mexico are hosting the World Cup. And that's, next to the Olympics, and maybe nowadays even more than the Olympics, that feeling of like the entire international community coming together, generally in a positive way, but rooting for their country, it's incredibly powerful. And the fact that we're hosting it, 75% of the games are going to be in the US. All the big games are going to be in the US. Although important games, of course, will be with our partners in Canada and Mexico. But for that to happen that very summer, we're reaching out now to US Soccer and to the coordinating body, because we'll be on the world stage then, and to be able to honor the international part of the American story through the World Cup is going to be it's one of those things that it feels like fate that those two things came together, and we're going to make sure to maximize that opportunity.
Yeah, I did not think about that. That is pretty crazy when you consider how huge the World Cup is. Maybe soccer is going to gain some new fans in the USA too, as well, throughout that process. Now, I don't know if you said this before I got on, but how can people get involved, and at what different levels can people get involved with this huge event?
So there's so many different ways to get involved. The place to start is by going to our website, america250.org. Super easy to remember, america250.org, and sign up for our newsletter. I think that's the best way to kind of chart our progress. Certainly go to our social channels, America250, and just become a part of it. I will say that we have to raise about $250 million. And although, major donations are going to be so critical, like the large 6- and 7-figure donations that come from really important American companies and high net worth individuals are going to be so critical. What's equally as important is participation. When you think of like great American causes, when the Statue of Liberty was created, when the Statue of Liberty was refurbished and reopened by President Reagan on July 4th, 1986, the campaigns that were used oftentimes were give $1, give $5, give a penny. We might need to up that now, but it's giving those small dollar donations. And I can tell you that, we were fortunate enough to raise $500 million for the 9/11 memorial, and the people that gave even the smallest amounts, but gave them early on, and then would continue to give small amounts, they really felt a part of it, almost part of the team that made it happen. And they took a very deserved and deep sense of pride when the memorial and then the museum opened. So there's lots of ways to give on our website. So if you feel like making a donation, that's great. But even more important, I'd say go to the website and sign up for the newsletter. Then you'll be part of the family. We'll be able to communicate directly with you. And it's a great way to get involved.
That's so cool. I've mentioned it to Cathy before, but we actually have a charitable performance group for Sing for America, my family and I. So I'd love to send her some information about us, and maybe we can get involved that way from a performance standpoint in some way during the event.
Definitely.
It's 2:48. I'm not sure if we should get to some audience questions, or I'll keep going.
Well, and we might want to, I think Tova may have had one other question, which before she got kicked off and frozen. Tova, are you, and she may still be having some, there you are.
I'm here, yes. So I was going to ask about international films, to show off America internationally, and what plans do you have in other nations?
I think I got the import of that. You broke up a little bit, but you were asking about the international component. Yeah, we got asking about the international component. So I think it's absolutely a priority, and it's going to be a big part of this. We are so fortunate to be working directly with the State Department, who is going to make sure that to be our bridge to other countries and getting them involved. We look at the international component in two ways. One is the countries that were so directly a part of our founding history. And then even more important, or as important, is America on the world stage over the last 250 years. So so many of the great historical events that have happened have had America as a part of it, often coming to the rescue. So the international component will be a big part of this in kind of all of our programming. And we have an international advisory committee made up of some former ambassadors, and it's going to be a big part of what we do.
Fantastic. And then my final question, my first sort of interaction with America 250 was back on the winners trip for Constituting America a few years ago. And what we had to do was had an assignment to write about what, like the ideal, to write a news article from imagine it's 2026, what would we be describing like the ideal celebration? What would that look like? So I was curious, briefly.
I missed some of that because I think you're breaking up a bit, but Kathy, did you catch some of it or?
Tova, were you asking what Joe's blue sky essay would look like, or how he would describe the day after the ideal celebration? Or I think what Tova was talking about, when our Constituting America winners were on their trip to Washington, D.C. in 2019, they had the opportunity to meet with the commission and give some of their ideas on what they would like to see some of the celebration look like. And I think part of what we asked them to do was write maybe a news story on what they might like the celebration to look like the day after, what kind of news story they would like to see that would run on July 5th, 2026.
Well, I'm glad I heard about this recently, and Kathy, I think you brought it up that some of the commissioners were asked to do something like this. So the team knows all about it, and we've brought so many good new people on that they're pouring through some of the old files. That notion of projecting and kind of dreaming is something that's, I think, really important in this. And certainly when we go out to the country to start soliciting ideas and thoughts and real thinking about what it means to be an American. I love this program, the idea to turn this idea into a program to ask students across the country about what they dream about when they think of America finishing its first 250 years and launching into its next 250. So I'll be back to you on what we can do with that.
Well, thank you. And Tova, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
Thank you so much for your time.
You bet.
Well, I do want to mention, Joe, when you talked about coming together, and I do remember as commissioners, one of the first things that we were asked to do, and we are a bipartisan commission. Our commissioners are appointed by both the Republican and the Democrat leadership of the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. And one of the things that struck me is we, as commissioners, we were all asked to write essays about what our vision would be of the celebration and what we think the perfect news story would be the day after. And the staff analyzed them and said that our commissioners, even though we came from very different sources of appointments and political philosophies, we agreed on over 80% of the fundamental values of this celebration and what our commission and the foundation is all about. And so it's been just a real honor to be a part of this commission and work with such great people on crafting the very best celebration and commemoration that we can craft. One other thing I wanted to mention on coming together is one of our commissioners, Dr. Wilfred McClay, has a great analogy of a family reunion. And he says, when our families come together, we don't always agree politically, but we come together at our family reunions to honor our family and to tell our shared stories and to celebrate our shared history and celebrate those things that make us a family. And I think that's just such a great analogy and something for us to all keep in mind as we head towards 2026. Now I think we've got just a few minutes here for some words from the audience. And I wanted to share, let's see, Dave Mountney says, my favorite bicentennial event was the state's wagon trains from different regions converging on Valley Forge on July 3rd, 1976. And I think that's just great to hear different people's bicentennial memories.
Yeah, that's cool. I do think we will have a component of that. The idea of the states converging in what we're thinking about to Philadelphia at a culminating point right around July 4th, 2026 is something we're exploring right now. So it's really cool to hear that. And we'll think about, the historical version of that as well as the most modern version of that. It could be a real great thing to do. So I'm glad that was shared.
And then John Chambers says, we've come to open our Constitution study meetings with the original Pledge of Allegiance before there was a flag, a republic for which it stood. It's the pledge from the Declaration, final line. With a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Let us all make that pledge again on our birthday. And John also said that he loved your definition of patriotism.
Well,
So-
I love that what he shared, and I mean, that kind of thing is really powerful. The idea of pledging, needing reliance from the other is a huge part of what made America America. They relied on each other to take the daring actions that were taken that has led to where we are today. And it's a really powerful spirit to rekindle.
And Ron Meyer had asked about state commissions, and Ron Meyer is from Georgia. And I think we don't yet have a state commission in Georgia, but one of the America 250 staff had helpfully dropped in a list of states where we do have commissions. So I had dropped that in to Ron on our trail. And I think most people hopefully can see that. And I think we would ask, if you see that your state does not have a commission yet, if you want to contact your state rep or your state senator or your governor and ask the status on your state's commission, because we do have a goal of reaching 50 commissions in all 50 states. Because I think, as you said, this is a celebration for all Americans, and it is our hope and dream that all 50 states will actively engage.
Absolutely. I love that. Love that.
So, and then I think the last one, and I know we had talked a little bit about youth programs, but would you want to mention our Carpenters Hall program, the signature program that we're putting together with Carpenters Hall in Philadelphia?
Absolutely. So in looking across the next 4 years, which is leading up to, of course, July 4th, 2026, we're going to begin what we're calling our core commemorative period on July 4th, 2024. And that whole period will be kicked off by what we're calling the Young People's Continental Congress, which is a program of Carpenters Hall in Philadelphia, where the first Continental Congress took place, and America 250. So this is a program that's going to take students and a teacher as a delegation, one from each state, come to Philadelphia. And as a part of that programming, it's going to begin the national kickoff. And it will show you that our very first national thing is about students, it's about teachers, and it's about our founding history, which I think is a really important signal for the years ahead.
Well, thank you. And, I know that so many of our listeners are members and leaders in other organizations. And we want to invite all of you to think about how your organization can craft some specific programs, or even brand some of your current programs to celebrate America 250. And I do believe that if you all want to write to become an official partner to America 250, you could email in and get information going through the website and going through the contact on how to do that. So our time is we're right here at the top of the hour. And
Perfect.
so we just want to thank you so much, Joe, for being our guest today. And thank you, Jewel and Tova and Aubrey, for all that you bring to every one of our chats every week. And we want to invite everyone back on July 5th. We're going to be starting our new series, Countdown to Constitution Day. And we're going to start by discussing the Constitutional Convention on Tuesday, July 5th. So we hope that you'll join us then. And until then, thank you again, Joe. It's just such an honor to work with you on as a member of the commission, and to see every day your leadership on the foundation. Thank you for all you do.
Well, I wanted to just turn that around and thank you, Cathy. It's been really incredible. And it was the same way at 9/11 that I'd be able to identify certain members of the board in that case, or the commission in this case, that go out of their way to really help us help the effort in every way possible. And you're just an amazing example of that. So when you asked me to do this, it was something I jumped at, and I look forward to working with you for the next 4 years.
Well, thank you. Well, you all have a great, happy Independence Day to everyone.
Absolutely. Happy July 4th.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.